He only meant to fix a porch light at 2 a.m., but when she whispered, "Please, I stay until morning," he didn't know it would change everything, not just for her, but for him too. Beat. If stories like this touch your heart, leave a like, subscribe, and stay with us. Just a little longer. Sometimes light finds you where you least expect it. The wind came down off the mountain like it had something to prove. Noah Danner sipped cold coffee from a cracked enamel mug and watched snow chase itself in spirals outside his trailer window. It was past 2 in the morning. He'd been half sleeping in the reclined front seat of his truck, radio muttering static, when the call came through from Earl at the gas station. "You still got your tools, Danner?" "Got a light out up on Pine. Ridge woman just moved in. Says her kid's scared of the dark." Noah almost said no. He didn't fix things anymore. Not since the fire. Not since the job stopped being something he could live with. But something about the way Earl said, "scared" of the dark made him pause. He turned the key. The truck coughed once, twice, then caught. The headlights cast 2 cones into the snow, and the engine growled as he made the slow climb up the narrow mountain road. Stillwater was the kind of town people drove through without stopping, a scattering of clapboard houses and sagging porches, clinging to the edges of wilderness. By night, it felt even more like the last place on earth. Noah liked it that way. The house at the top of Pine Ridge was barely visible through the falling snow. A porch light flickered, buzzed, then went out completely. A single dim lamp burned behind the front window, casting long shadows that stretched across the driveway. He parked, engine idling, and stared at the house for a moment. Something about the quiet made his palms itch. When he finally stepped out, snow crunched beneath his boots. He climbed the porch steps, knocked twice. It took a minute. Then the door opened a crack and he saw her, framed by the glow of the hallway behind her. Mid-30s, maybe. Tired eyes. Hair pulled back like she hadn't had time to think about it. She was holding a wool blanket tight around her shoulders. "Sorry," she said. "It's late, I know, the porch light keeps going out. And my niece." She glanced behind her. A small face peeked out from the hallway. A girl, maybe 6, in flannel pajamas, clutching a stuffed dog to her chest. Her eyes were wide, watching Noah like he might disappear if she blinked. "She won't sleep when it's dark outside." The woman finished. "I didn't know who else to call." Noah hesitated, then nodded. "I've got some tools in the truck." The repair took longer than it should have. The bulb was fine. It was the wiring, brittle from the cold, probably chewed through in places. He worked in silence, fingers stiff, the wind slicing under his jacket. He didn't say much, and neither did she. She told him her name was May Whitaker, that they'd just moved in 2 weeks ago from downstate. The house belonged to a relative. She didn't say more, he didn't ask. The girl, Evie, she said, never spoke at all. Just stood behind the front door, eyes fixed on his every move like he was some rare animal no one was sure was safe. Noah kept his focus on the wires. 10 minutes later, the porch light came back to life with a soft click and a steady, amber glow. The kind of light that made snow look less like a threat and more like a lullaby. He stepped back, watching the bulb for a second, as if making sure it would stay lit this time. "Should hold," he said. May exhaled. It was a small sound, but it filled the space between them like warmth. "Thank you," she said, voice gentler now. "She'll sleep tonight. That means everything." He nodded, turned back toward the steps. "Mr. Danner," May said behind him. He paused. She looked down at her feet, then up at him. Snowflakes had begun to gather in her hair. "Would you—" She hesitated, her voice so quiet it barely crossed the space between them. "Would you stay? Until morning?" Then, quickly, "Not for me, for her. She sleeps better when she knows someone's nearby." The wind blew again, harder this time, and for a second he was standing somewhere else. A different porch, a different winter night, a girl trapped behind glass. The fire was already eating the roof, and all he could do was scream at the smoke. He blinked. May was still standing there, Evie still watching, and the porch light was still on. He could say no. He wanted to say no. Instead, he nodded once and walked back to his truck. He parked it where he could see the porch, left the engine off, wrapped himself in an old army blanket from the back seat, and leaned back in the chair, eyes half closed but still watching the light. Inside the house, May turned off the hallway lamp, but the porch light stayed on, and that, somehow, felt like more than just electricity. It felt like permission. To stay. Just this once. Just until morning. Morning came slow and pale, the kind of light that felt unsure of itself, filtered through the frost-crusted windows of Noah's truck. He hadn't slept much, just dozed in and out, his breath fogging up the windshield, watching the porch light hold steady through the dark. There'd been no sound from inside the house, no flicker from behind the curtains. Only that warm, quiet glow, like a promise he didn't know how to name. He wasn't supposed to stay, and yet, he hadn't left. When the front door finally opened, it was the little girl who came out first. No coat, barefoot, just flannel pajamas, and a pair of small hands gripping a piece of paper folded in half. She stood at the top of the steps, blinking against the morning snow like she wasn't quite sure he was real. Noah opened his door and stepped out, the cold slapping his skin through layers. "Hey there," he said softly, crouching down. "That for me?" She didn't nod, didn't speak, just walked forward in slow, deliberate steps and handed him the paper like it weighed more than she could carry. He opened it. It was a drawing, crayon-on-lined notebook paper. 3 stick figures, one taller, one medium, one very small. Above them, a porch with a glowing yellow bulb, and above that, a sky full of stars and one bright moon. Noah felt something unsteady move in his chest. He looked up. "You drew this?" She didn't blink, didn't smile, just looked at him with a kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt full, pressurized, ancient. Then she turned and walked back into the house. May came out a few minutes later carrying a mismatched mug and a folded sweater. "She must, like you," she said, offering both. "She doesn't usually draw for people, or go outside in the morning." Noah took the sweater without thinking, pulled it over his flannel. "She doesn't talk?" May shook her head. "Not since the fire." The words settled between them like snowflakes, soft but unignorable. "It wasn't here," she said after a moment. "It happened downstate. Her mother, my sister, got caught in it. The police say it was arson. Her ex-husband. They'd been fighting over custody. He didn't make it either." Noah looked at the porch light. Still on. Still steady. "Evie." "Made it out," May continued, wrapping her arms around herself. "They found her huddled in a closet covered in ash, gripping a photo of her mom. She hasn't spoken since. Doctors say it's trauma. I call it heartbreak." She tried to smile but couldn't. "I didn't plan on raising a child. I didn't even know how to talk to her for the first few weeks. Still don't most days. But I made her a promise. No more moving, no more courts, no more fear. Just light. Always a light on." Noah didn't say anything. He couldn't, because inside his head a different fire raged. It had been almost 5 years, but he still remembered the heat. The screaming. The moment he hesitated. 1 second too long, 1 step too slow. The girl inside that burning house had been 8. He hadn't seen her face clearly through the smoke, but he still remembered the outline of her reaching hand, the way the beam above her cracked. She hadn't made it, and neither had he, not really. He'd resigned a month later. Moved up north. Bought a trailer from a man who didn't ask questions. Told himself it was just for a while, that he'd fix things, find a way back. But just for a while turned into years. And every time he saw a porch light flicker or heard a siren in the distance, something inside him shut down all over again. May was watching him now, like maybe she saw something shift in his posture. "I'm sorry," she said, "that was a lot. You didn't sign up for stories." Noah shook his head. "It's okay. I used to be a firefighter." May's expression changed, just slightly. "You don't do that anymore?" No. He left it there. No details. No confessions. But the silence that followed felt understood. She looked at Evie's drawing in his hand. She used to talk in her sleep, you know. Now she doesn't even do that. But she draws. A lot. Her therapist says it's a kind of language, that we just have to learn to read it. Noah folded the drawing carefully like it might tear. Well, he said, clearing his throat, she's got good instincts. That was the closest he could get to saying thank you. May looked toward the horizon where the trees cut the sky in jagged lines. You don't have to stay, you know. I mean, thank you. For last night. But we'll be all right now. You don't have to keep checking in. Noah nodded, and for a second he almost believed he'd leave, but he didn't. Instead, he said, if that light goes out again, call me. May didn't smile exactly, but something in her eyes eased like a knot pulling loose. You sure? He shrugged. It's just a light. But they both knew it wasn't. That evening, Noah drove home with the drawing on the passenger seat. He didn't tack it up or frame it. He just looked at it every so often, tracing the lines with his eyes. The little girl, the glowing bulb, the sky full of stars. It made him feel something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Not peace, not forgiveness, but a flicker. Something like warmth. And the porch light in his memory. It stayed on. Noah came by again the next afternoon. He told himself it was just to check the wiring, make sure the porch light was holding steady. Cold could do strange things to old houses, especially ones left empty too long. Wires stiffen, wood shrinks, lights flicker. That was the story he stuck to. The truth had more to do with a girl who drew him into a picture and a woman whose voice stayed with him longer than it should have. May met him at the door with a mug of something hot. Ginger tea, she said, almost apologetically. It's what we had. Noah took it, grateful more for the warmth than the taste. Inside, the house smelled of lemon cleaner and something baking, comfort and effort stitched together. A fire crackled in the wood stove, not too big, just enough to thaw the edges of the room. Evie sat cross-legged on the rug, a sketchbook in her lap. She didn't look up when Noah stepped inside. May followed his gaze. She's drawing you again, she said softly, with a hint of amusement. You're hard to read, apparently. She likes puzzles. Noah watched the girl's pencil move, measured, slow. Is that a good thing? With her? May smiled faintly. It's the best thing. He crouched by the fuse box in the hallway, half listening to the wind creak against the siding. Everything looked stable. No phrase, no moisture. But as he turned to leave, something caught his eye in the corner of the room. Evie was holding a matchbook. She wasn't lighting anything, just flipping it open, looking at the little sticks like they were bones. Her fingers moved delicately, almost reverently, like she wasn't afraid of them, like they meant something else to her. Noah froze. The image slammed into him, sharp, uninvited. A child's bedroom filled with smoke, a little girl's face, pressed to the window, her mouth open but no sound coming out. The sound of a beam cracking. His feet paralyzed on the threshold. The air in the hallway tightened. He stepped forward instinctively, voice sharper than intended. Hey, Evie flinched, her fingers snapping the matchbook shut. May appeared in an instant, eyes wide. What happened? Noah stopped, pulled back. She was holding matches. May knelt beside Evie, gently taking the book from her hand. Where did you find these, sweetie? Evie pointed, toward a forgotten drawer in the old kitchen hutch. May sighed quietly. She finds things. Sometimes things I thought I'd thrown away. Noah's voice was low now, apologetic but brittle. She shouldn't be playing with those. She wasn't playing. May stood, brushing her knees. She was looking. Noah looked at Evie again. The girl wasn't crying. She wasn't even blinking. She just stared at him, wide-eyed, as if trying to decide whether or not he'd break. He left earlier than he meant to. The drive back was silent. Snow was beginning to fall again, dry and light, dancing across the windshield. His hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary. At a red light outside the general store, he realized he was still holding the ginger tea untouched. He pulled into the turnout by the lake, shut the engine off, and sat. He hated how fast it happened. The panic, the shame. He hadn't yelled, not really. But he'd scared her. That little girl who'd handed him her trust on a folded piece of paper. And what had he done? Snapped. Just like that. Because of matches. Because of memory. Because he'd built his life on not feeling. And then one small girl cracked a hole straight through the middle of it. Later that night, he found the drawing she'd given him. He unfolded it, slowly. The 3 stick figures. The porch light. The stars. But now he noticed something he hadn't before. The small figure, the one that was probably her, was holding something. A little square shape. Maybe a book, or a box of matches. The next morning he went back, didn't call first, he knocked once, twice. May opened the door with her cardigan half on and surprise in her eyes. You okay? I think I owe her an apology. May stepped aside. She's in the kitchen. Evie sat at the table, legs swinging, a bowl of cereal mostly ignored in front of her. Her sketchbook was open again. This time, the page held something new, a flame, small, gentle, yellow and orange. And next to it 3 stick figures again, this time holding hands. Noah crouched beside her chair. Hey, he said quietly. About yesterday. I didn't mean to scare you. He exhaled. Matches make me nervous. Fire makes me nervous. That's not your fault. Evie looked at him, her eyes searching his face like she was reading something written there that he'd forgotten how to see. Then, so soft he almost missed it, she slid the sketchbook toward him. He looked again. This time the porch light was in the drawing too, still on, still glowing. May leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching them. You didn't scare her, she said, voice steady. You scared yourself. Noah glanced at her. What if I'm not good at this? May shrugged, half a smile playing at her lips. Neither am I. But we're here. That counts for something. Outside, snow was beginning to melt in slow rivulets down the eaves. Inside, the fire in the stove crackled once, soft, contained, alive. And the porch light? It stayed on. It was May who brought it up. Not with fanfare, not with warning. Just a quiet morning, steam curling up from 2 mismatched mugs in the kitchen, and the sound of Evie's pencil scratching across her sketchbook in the living room. Noah had come to help reseal the back door. The wind had found its way in again overnight, and May had mentioned, offhandedly like she wasn't sure she was allowed to ask, that if he had time, maybe he could take a look. He had time. He always had time now. They didn't talk much while he worked. But he noticed she stayed in the room this time, sipping her tea by the window, eyes distant, like someone waiting for something to arrive and not entirely sure she wanted it to. Do you want to know what happened to her mother? She asked, not looking at him. Noah didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure if she meant the question or just needed to say it aloud. Either way, she went on. Her name was Lucy, my little sister, 7 years younger than me. The funny one, the dreamer. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She got pregnant at 19, married a man I barely knew, the kind of guy who looks clean and says all the right things until the doors are closed. Noah kept working, slow and deliberate. The wood beneath his hands was soft from years of neglect. It splintered if he wasn't careful. He was charming in public, kind even. But he wore her down, piece by piece, controlled everything, who she saw, where she went, what she wore. Then it turned to shouting, then bruises. And then one night he broke her wrist because she forgot to record his game. She paused. The only sound was the wind against the siding and the soft whistle of the kettle about to boil. That was when she called me. Noah tightened a screw in silence. He didn't ask why May hadn't intervened earlier. He already knew. These things were never obvious until it's too late. Control doesn't wear a uniform. Sometimes it sounds like affection. May continued, voice quieter now. I told her to come up here. Said she and Evie could stay with me. I'd protect them. We made a plan. She was going to leave that weekend. Pack light, come up by bus. I even made up the spare room. She looked out the window like she could see the ghost of it still waiting. But he found her bags. Her mouth opened once like she was going to say more, but didn't. The house burned down that night. Noah stopped moving. The screwdriver slipped slightly in his hand. His fingers trembled. Not much, but enough for him to notice. He didn't look at May. He couldn't. Not right away. They said it was electrical at first, she went on, her tone bitter now. Faulty wiring. But the investigation found traces of accelerant, and the gas line had been tampered with. Noah's voice came low and hoarse, unexpected even to him. He locked them in. May nodded. But Lucy had time to hide Evie in a hallway closet. First responders found her there, barefoot, covered in soot, still holding Lucy's photograph. She didn't say what Lucy looked like when they found her. She didn't have to. The room was very still. Noah stared down at the hinge he'd been fixing, unsure what to do with his hands now. His stomach had twisted itself into something tight and sharp. He'd been to dozens of fires, seen the aftermath, known the smell of burned wood, the brittle silence after lives have turned to ash, but it was always worse when children were involved. Always. That was what broke him. Not the danger, not the hours, the silence afterward. May exhaled, long and quiet. I don't tell a lot of people, she said. Most just offer condolences and awkward silences. But you, I figured maybe you'd understand. Noah looked at her then. Not directly. Just enough. Why's that? Because you look like someone who walks around with smoke still clinging to him. They sat in the kitchen for a long while after that, not saying much. Evie stayed in the living room, humming to herself under her breath as she colored. It was a tune neither of them recognized, but it had a rhythm, like memory softened by time. Noah glanced into the room once, watched the girl's shoulders moving in a quiet, deliberate rhythm. The crayon in her hand was orange, flame-colored. Before he left, May handed him something, a small tin box. Found it in one of Lucy's old bags. Thought you might be the kind of person who appreciates things like this. Inside was a Zippo lighter, tarnished, with initials engraved on the side. Torjayu, she carried it everywhere, May said. Didn't even smoke, just liked the sound it made when it closed. Noah turned it over in his hand, flicked it open, then shut. Click, click. It was a small sound, but it echoed. That night, back in his trailer, he couldn't sleep. The wind had picked up again, whistling low through the pine outside. He sat by the small window, the lighter in his palm, thumb pressing down again and again. He didn't light it, didn't need to, just listened. Click, click. In the dark, the image returned. Evie standing in the doorway, a matchbook in her fingers. Not afraid, just watching. Noah stared out the window toward May's house. The porch light was still on, burning steady, just like Lucy. The first sign that something was changing came on a Wednesday. Noah arrived with a toolbox slung over one shoulder and a fresh loaf of bread tucked under his arm. He hadn't baked it, just picked it up at the co-op on Main Street. But when May opened the door and saw it, she blinked like it was a gift she hadn't expected to receive from the world again. Bread? She said, half a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Noah shifted on his feet. Figured you could use something other than boxed mac and cheese. May took the loaf gently, like it might crumble in her hands. We're not picky. It's still warm, he added without looking at her. She nodded. That's the best kind. Inside, the house had begun to feel different. Noah didn't say anything, but he noticed the changes. A new rug in the hallway, a picture frame repaired with glue, a small row of paperbacks stacked neatly on the windowsill. And in the kitchen, taped to the refrigerator, Evie's latest drawings, not just of people anymore. There were trees, a yellow house, a dog that may or may not have existed, a porch with a swing, and always, always, a light shining in the corner of every scene. He said nothing, just smiled faintly and reached for the loose cabinet hinge he'd come to fix. That afternoon, Evie followed him outside while he worked. She didn't speak. She never did. But she watched, her shadow falling long beside his in the slanting light. He was installing a new latch on the garden gate, one that didn't squeal like it was in pain every time the wind pushed it open. Evie crouched near the step, drawing something in the dirt with a stick. Every so often, she'd glance over at him like she was waiting for a signal she didn't know how to ask for. After a while, Noah wiped his hands on a rag and sat beside her in the grass. "What you drawing?" She didn't answer, just tilted the stick so he could see. It was a fire. Noah's chest tensed, but then she added something. 3 small circles beside the flame. And above them, a roof. A house, not burning, just warm. A place where fire meant heat, not danger. He didn't speak, just nodded, and she smiled, just a flicker, brief and shy. But it was real. Later, inside, May was pulling something from the oven. It wasn't anything fancy, just cinnamon apples baked with a sprinkle of oats. But the scent filled the kitchen like memory. It reminded Noah of snow days in a house he hadn't thought about in years, of his mother's laugh, of wool socks drying near the heater. She wanted to try making something, May said, nodding toward Evie, who was now sitting at the table with a napkin folded in her lap, like she was at a 5-star restaurant. "I helped," May added, but she picked the recipe, drew it, actually. She handed Noah a scrap of paper, Evie's careful crayon lines showing a dish with wavy steam lines and a happy face beside it. He laughed, a sound that surprised even him. "She's got taste." May slid a warm bowl in front of him. "She also insisted you stay for dinner." He paused, then sat. They ate slowly. Evie didn't say a word, but her eyes moved constantly, watching Noah, watching May, glancing at the oven like it might offer another surprise. She was still a little too thin, still guarded. But tonight she seemed anchored. Like something had clicked into place. She used to hate the sound of forks on plates, May murmured after Evie left to go color. "Any sharp sound, really. Still flinches if I drop something." Noah nodded. "The brain keeps the alarms, even when the fire's out." "Ugh." May looked at him then, not with pity, but recognition. They were 2 people who lived with embers, and for the first time neither of them tried to hide it. After dinner, Noah helped dry dishes while May washed. Their elbows bumped once. He muttered, a quiet sorry. She said nothing, but her smile lingered longer than necessary. Outside, dusk settled across the yard like a blanket. The porch light flicked on, without flicker, without fail. Before he left, Evie walked up to him with something in her hands, a rock, painted with watercolors. Sloppy, earnest, childlike. On its surface, 3 stick figures beneath a shining yellow circle. She held it out wordlessly. He took it like it was made of glass. "Thank you," he said. Evie didn't smile, but she placed a finger gently on his wrist. Just once, then walked away. That night, Noah sat in his truck, the painted rock on the dash, the Zippo lighter in his coat pocket, and the ghost of cinnamon still clinging to his jacket. He looked toward the porch. The light was still on, and inside, there were 3 people, 3 shadows cast against a curtain. He was one of them, for now. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. It was just a sound, a sharp mechanical shriek that sliced through the quiet of a Sunday morning. But for Noah, it hit like an explosion. He'd been on the porch, tightening the bolts on a crooked stair rail when the alarm went off. 3 sudden pulses, loud and insistent, echoing through the walls like something was tearing the house apart. From the inside, he dropped the wrench. Didn't think. Just ran. Inside, the kitchen was filled with smoke. Not thick, not dangerous. Just the kind that stings the eyes and turns the air to soup. The oven door hung open. A tray of cookies lay burning into crisp black rounds, forgotten. Evie stood in the corner, motionless. Her hands were clamped over her ears, eyes wide, fixed on the red blinking light on the smoke detector above her. May was already fanning the air with a towel, coughing. "I just stepped away for a second," she gasped. They were only supposed to be in for 8 minutes. Noah didn't respond. He crossed the room in 2 long strides, dropped to one knee beside Evie. "It's okay," he said, but his voice was too loud, too sharp. His own panic coloring the words. She flinched. He softened, lowered his tone, slowed his breath. "Evie," he tried again, gently now. "It's just the alarm. Just noise. We're safe. No fire. Just smoke." Her lips were parted, but no sound came. Her eyes were locked on the ceiling, tracking the red flash like it was a threat. Then, without warning, she bolted. Out of the kitchen, through the hallway, bare feet on wood floors. Noah followed instinctively, calling her name. He found her, in the hallway closet, same one as in the story May had told him. Evie was curled tight in the corner, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around a pillow she must have grabbed on the way. Her body was still, but her breath came fast, like a bird trapped in a box too small to fly. Noah crouched outside the door. Didn't speak right away. Just sat with her, close but not touching, as the alarm quieted behind them. Silence returned, slowly. May appeared a moment later, face pale, hands trembling. "I didn't know it would." Noah held up a hand. "It's not your fault." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I should have unplugged it when I saw the smoke. I panicked. We all do." May knelt beside him. She used to do this, right after, whenever anything reminded her. Sirens, oven timers, even the kettle whistling. It's gotten better. But sometimes... Her voice broke. She covered her mouth and looked away. Noah placed a hand on her shoulder, not for comfort, just to say, "I'm here too." After a long while, Evie's breathing slowed. She didn't cry, didn't speak. But when Noah held out his hand, palm open, she reached out and pressed hers to his for just a moment. It was enough. He helped her out gently. She didn't let go of the pillow, but she let him walk beside her back into the kitchen. May had opened all the windows. The air was cold but clean. The burnt cookies sat forgotten on the counter, charcoal monuments to an accidental storm. "We're okay now," May said, kneeling in front of Evie. "See? All clear. No fire. Just a baking fail." Evie didn't nod, but she moved to sit at the table again. That was her answer. Later, while May made tea, Noah sat outside on the porch steps. The cold felt good on his skin. Grounding. He needed it. He hated how quickly it had come back. The noise, the helplessness. The image of a child too still in the corner of a house that smelled too much like smoke. He'd spent years building walls around that day. But Evie walked right through them without even knowing. May stepped out a few minutes later, too, mugs in hand. They didn't speak at first. The sun was dipping behind the tree line, casting long amber lines across the snow. She used to hum in closets, May said. Not full songs, just sounds, as if the quiet was too loud and she had to fill it with something. Noah stared ahead into the pines. "I knew a firefighter once," he said slowly. Retired after a 5-alarm blaze. They found him in his backyard 3 years later. He'd rebuilt his grill 27 times. Said it was the only fire he could control. May didn't laugh, but she reached for his hand, not in romance, not even in comfort, just a gesture, human to human. "You stayed," she said. Noah nodded. "I wasn't sure I could, but you did." That night, before he left, Evie brought out her sketchbook. She opened to a new page and handed it to him. It was a closet. Inside it, 2 sticks, Figures sat side by side. Outside the door there was smoke, but above it all, drawn high in the corner, was the porch light. Still on. Noah drove home slowly. Windows cracked to let the cold in. He didn't turn on the radio. Didn't light the Zippo in his pocket. He just held the drawing against the steering wheel at every red light, watching the little figures sitting quietly in the dark, together, and, in the rearview mirror behind the trees, the porch light of May's house shone like a lighthouse. Steady. Unmoving. Lit for more than just them now. Lit for him, too. It started with the chicken wire. May had mentioned, offhandedly, that she wanted to build a little pen for hens come spring. Just a few, nothing fancy. Enough to keep Evie busy, give her something soft to care for. Noah hadn't said anything at the time, but the next morning he showed up with a roll of wire fencing strapped to the roof of his truck, a weathered toolbox in one hand and a thermos of coffee in the other. May blinked at him through the screen door. That looked suspiciously like commitment. He shrugged. I had the morning free. She raised an eyebrow. And the afternoon? That too. And just like that, they began. The work was quiet, rhythmic. He dug post holes while May leveled the frame. Evie helped by sorting screws into jars and humming under her breath. The sun came out halfway through the day, watery but warm, and for a while, it felt like spring might actually be on its way. They didn't talk about anything important, just tools, soil, weather. But Noah felt something loosening in his chest, like the air didn't weigh as much. Every so often, May would hand him something, water, a drill bit, a slice of apple, and their fingers would brush. Nothing lingered, but nothing ran away either. That afternoon, as they tested the first section of fencing, Noah caught Evie watching him. She stood by the porch steps, hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater, a cautious sort of smile playing at the edge of her mouth. When he met her eyes, she raised one hand and gave him a thumbs up. It was small, simple, but it landed like sunlight in his ribs. He nodded, back. Thanks, boss. She giggled. Quietly, but it was a real sound. The first he'd heard from her that wasn't just breath. Later, over a late lunch of leftover stew and cornbread, May pushed her hair behind her ear and said, "You're good with your hands." Noah looked down at his calloused palms. Used to be. Still are. She let the silence sit for a second, then added, "Ever thought about starting again?" He raised an eyebrow. Starting what? Anything. A job. A shop. A life. Noah didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure how to say, "I'm afraid if I build anything, I'll burn it down again." Instead, he said, "I'm not sure I remember how." May gave a soft smile, warm and sad at once. "You just did. Out there. Chicken wire and all." That evening, as the sun dipped low, Noah stayed behind after dinner. Evie was asleep on the couch, a blanket pulled up to her chin, her sketchbook resting on her chest. May sat in the armchair, cradling a chipped mug in both hands. The light was low. The room smelled like cinnamon and cedar. Outside, snow began to fall in delicate spirals. Noah stood, restless. "You got any tools you're not using?" May looked up. "In the garage, maybe." "Why?" "I want to fix your back steps. They've been loose since I got here." "You don't have to." "I know." He grabbed his coat and stepped out into the cold. An hour passed. He removed each step, sanded the wood, reinforced the risers. Slow work. Quiet work. The kind that lets your mind think without trying. At some point, May came out and sat beside him on the porch. She didn't say anything at first, just watched. Then softly, "You." No, she doesn't draw people unless she trusts them. Noah glanced at her, a piece of sandpaper in his hand. "And me?" May smiled. "She's drawing you with us now." The wind blew, just enough to lift her hair from her face. "You're not just a visitor anymore, Noah." He didn't answer. Not out of silence, but reverence. like the words needed space to settle. He finished the last step just before midnight. When he stood, stretching his back, May handed him a mug of tea. "You staying?" she asked, not teasing. He looked back at the porch light, still glowing, then up at the stars, then at her. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." That night he slept in the truck like usual, but this time he didn't feel like he was parked outside someone else's life. He felt like he was watching over something that mattered. Just before dawn, he woke to the soft patter of footsteps. Evie stood by his door wrapped in a blanket. She didn't knock, just placed a drawing on the window and stepped back. He opened the door slowly, careful not to startle her. The drawing showed 3 figures, standing in front of a coupe. Behind them, a house. Above it, the porch light. And beneath it, in her wobbly lettering, "You make it feel safe." Noah swallowed, then knelt to her level. "Thank you," he whispered. Evie reached out, tucked the drawing into his jacket pocket, and pressed her forehead briefly to his shoulder before turning back toward the house. Noah stayed crouched there for a long moment, breath misting in the cold. The stars were still out, but they were fading. Because morning was coming, and he was still here. The letter arrived folded in thirds, slipped between junk mail and a hardware catalog. Noah almost missed. There was no return address, just his name in a careful hand, written in black ink on a cream-colored envelope, sealed like something sacred or dangerous. He stared at it for a long time before opening it. Then he read it standing up, in the kitchen of his trailer, as snow fell soft and steady against the window behind him. "Mr. Danner, I don't know if you remember me. My daughter's name was Zoe Hart. You were one of the firefighters who responded to the call that night. I've wanted to write to you for a long time, but I didn't know if I should, if it would help, if it would hurt." Noah sat down. His hands shook. He kept reading. "There's no good way to talk about what happened, no right language for loss, but I wanted you to know something. I don't blame you. You didn't leave her behind. I know you think you did, but she was already gone. You tried. That matters. Zoe was kind. She was quiet. She loved animals and hated loud music, and always slept with the door open because she was afraid of the dark. But she wasn't afraid at the end. I believe that. I believe she wasn't alone. I've forgiven you. Years ago, before I even learned your name. I hope someday you'll do the same." Claire Hart, he read it again, then again. Each sentence landed like rain on dry earth, soft, relentless, soaking in places he didn't know were still parched. He thought about the girl in the bedroom, her small hand pressed against the window. He thought about Evie in the closet, May in the kitchen, the porch light. He set the letter down with reverence like it might break. And then he wept. Not the sharp kind of crying that wounds, but the slow, exhausted kind. The kind that comes only when something finally lets go after being clenched for too long. That evening he returned to May's house just as the sky turned gold behind the trees. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood on the porch holding a folded piece of paper, unsure of how to explain a grief that wasn't his alone. May opened the door and saw his face. "Come in," she said, voice steady. They sat at the kitchen table while Evie napped upstairs. The only sounds were the kettle and the creak of the wood floor settling as the house warmed. Noah passed her the letter. May read it slowly, then placed it down. "She gave you something most people wait their whole lives for," she said. "I don't feel like I deserve it." May met his eyes. "That's not the same as not needing it." They sat in silence a long time, not uncomfortable, just honest. Then May poured him a cup of tea and placed her hand lightly over his. It was enough. The next morning he found Evie outside in the backyard, arranging small stones in a circle. She looked up when he approached and patted the ground beside her. He sat. She placed a stone in his palm, painted red and gold, with a line of tiny dots trailing like smoke. "What's this one mean?" he asked. She didn't answer, but she handed him a second stone, this one blue with a single bright dot in the center. A light. He understood. Together, they added them to the ring. A little place for memory, and maybe something more. That afternoon, Noah fixed the broken gutter on the far side of the house, then the door on the shed, then the loose floorboard near the stairs. One repair after another like stitches in a frayed sleeve. May watched from the kitchen window. There was something healing in the movement of him, steady, careful, purposeful. She hadn't known how badly the house had needed this kind of tending, or how much she had. That night before heading home, Noah stood on the porch and looked back at the house. He could hear May humming upstairs. Evie laughing, muffled. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the Zippo. It clicked open. He didn't light it, just flicked it once. Click, then again. Click. Then he closed it and set it gently on the porch rail. A kind of offering. A leaving, behind. Driving back, he took the long way. The route that passed the fire station. The route he'd avoided for years. He slowed near the building. Its windows were dark. Snow piled along the sidewalk. But the flag still moved gently in the night. Wind, he pulled over, sat for a moment and whispered, "I tried," then put the truck in drive, and left. When he got back to his trailer, there was a drawing taped to his door. Evie's handwriting in blocky, careful letters. "You're not a firefighter, but you put things back together." And beneath it a picture of 3 figures, a house and a porch light, still on. It was a Thursday morning, cool and overcast, the kind of gray that settled into your bones. Noah was in the backyard, reinforcing the posts on the chicken coop. A storm had swept through the night before, nothing major, but enough to remind him how wind could undo what hands had worked hard to hold together. Inside the house, May was baking. Again. It had become a habit, a quiet ritual. She called it therapy through cinnamon. Evie was somewhere in the living room. Drawing, probably. She always was. No one expected the day to mean anything. Until it did. He was hammering a new support beam when May appeared at the back door, apron, dusted with flour, her brow furrowed. Not in worry exactly, but in something softer. Confusion, wonder. "She's asking for you," she said. Noah paused mid-swing. "Who?" "Evie." He turned slowly. "She said something?" May nodded, eyes shining just a little. Clear as day. Noah dropped the hammer, walked inside without wiping his boots. Evie sat on the couch, legs folded beneath her, sketchbook in her lap. She looked smaller than usual, but more present, like someone who'd stepped fully into the room after living half outside it for a long time. When she saw him, she held up the sketchbook. He took it gently. On the page, the 3 of them, standing beside a chicken coop. Above them, a bright yellow bulb. The porch light, as always. But this time, next to the drawing were 4 words, written in Evie's unmistakable, careful print. "I want to stay." Noah swallowed. His throat felt thick. "You already are," he said softly. Evie hesitated. Then, did something she hadn't done in over a year. She closed the sketchbook, set it aside, and said, "Please, stay." 2 words. Quiet. Scratchy. Unsteady. But they cracked the air open like sunlight through a storm cloud. Noah didn't move. May didn't breathe. Evie blinked twice, and for a second seemed unsure if she'd actually said anything at all. Then, she looked directly at Noah and smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a small one. The kind that comes not from joy but relief, like something that had been held in for too long had finally been allowed to stretch. Noah sat down beside her, slow and careful. "You're really brave, you know that?" Evie shrugged, shy again. But she didn't look away. May knelt on the rug beside them. "What made you say it, sweetheart?" Evie looked down at her hands, then up at the window. Outside, the porch light was still glowing against the dim gray sky. She pointed to it and whispered, "It stayed on." That afternoon, they didn't talk about it. Not much. Evie went back to drawing. May finished the baking. Noah fixed the last hinge on the back door. But something had shifted. The silence that had once surrounded Evie like a wall now felt more like a choice. Not a cage, but a place she could step in and out of when she wanted to. A door, not a lock. And Noah, he felt the ground beneath him settle. He hadn't realized how much of him had still been waiting to be let in. That evening, May brought out 3 mismatched cups and poured cider for each of them. They sat on the porch together, Evie between them, sketchbook on her knees. "Do you ever miss it?" May asked Noah. "The job?" He thought about it. "Sometimes." "Why did you stop?" He looked at Evie, then at the porch light. "I thought I didn't deserve it anymore." May didn't try to argue, just said, "Sometimes we have to be pulled out of the fire before we can walk into light again." He smiled, just a little. "That sounds like something from a greeting card." "Maybe," she said, "but it doesn't make it less true." Evie tapped his hand. He looked down. She'd drawn another picture. This one was different. It was a porch at night. But the house wasn't hers. It was his. A small trailer, and outside it, someone had taped a child's drawing to the door. He looked at her, touched. "That's real," he said. "You remembered?" Evie nodded. Then she whispered, "I remember everything." He exhaled slowly, carefully. "Me too." When the sky turned dark, May turned the porch light on, but it didn't feel like a habit anymore. It felt like a ritual, a vow almost, something sacred in its simplicity, a way of saying you are welcome still even after the dark. That night when Noah drove back to his trailer, he didn't feel like he was leaving something behind. He felt like he was carrying something forward, something small, something warm. And when he stepped out of the truck, the first thing he did was screw in a new bulb over his own front door. Then, he flipped the switch, and for the first time in years, his porch light came on. Spring came late to Stillwater, as if winter had taken one last long breath before letting go. Snow melted slowly from the rooftops, revealing patches of earth beneath. The trees along Pine Ridge remained bare, but the air carried something different now, less brittle, more forgiving. The light stayed longer each evening, and in May's yard, the soil had begun to breathe again. Noah was still there. Not just dropping by, not just fixing things, he was staying. The change wasn't marked by a speech, or a key exchange, or any declaration. It was simpler than that. One morning he moved a box from his truck to the garage. The next day, a second. And one afternoon, May caught him hanging his jacket on the hook inside the front door without thinking. "You left your coat," she said, smiling. "Did I?" He replied, but he didn't move to take it back. The chicken coop was finished. Evie had named each of the hens after stars: Vega, Lyra, Andromeda. She fed them carefully every morning, speaking in soft tones that only they were meant to hear. Sometimes, she spoke to Noah too, just a word or two at first, then full sentences, cautious and uneven like a bird learning how to land. She never apologized for the silence. He never asked her to. They just met each other where they were, and that, somehow, was more than enough. One night they lit a fire in the backyard, contained, safe, circled in stone. May brought out marshmallows. Evie drew constellations in the dirt with a stick. Noah sat beside them, sipping coffee, watching the sparks drift upward like thoughts you could almost reach if you were brave enough. "She's different," May said quietly. "Softer lately. Lighter." Noah nodded. "So are you." She looked at him then. Really looked. "And you?" He thought about the question for a moment, then answered truthfully, "I'm not afraid of fire anymore." Later that week, they took a drive down to the lake. The road was muddy but passable, the trees casting long shadows across the gravel. May packed sandwiches. Evie brought her sketchbook. They sat on a blanket overlooking the still water. Evie drew Noah's truck with a sun. Above it, she drew the coupe, then the house. Then, carefully, she added 3 stick figures holding hands. Above them, a tiny yellow circle. The porch light, still on. That night, after Evie went to bed, Noah and May sat on the porch, watching moths flit in and out of the light's warm circle. Eerie, quiet was comfortable, earned. You know, May said, I used to think the light was for her, so she wouldn't be afraid. Noah glanced at her. And now? She turned toward him. Now I think it was for all of us, he nodded. Some nights I still sit in the truck, he admitted. Not because I have to. Just to remind myself I can leave, and choose not to. May didn't say anything, just reached out, took his hand. In the weeks that followed, small things changed. Noah taught Evie how to sand a piece of wood smooth, how to use a screwdriver, how to read weather patterns in the clouds. May found an old set of shelves in the attic. Together, the 3 of them turned the dining room into a little library. They cooked, they laughed, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes easily. They lived. And then, one Sunday morning, Evie taped a sign to the refrigerator. It read, "This is home." Noah stared at it for a long time, then added beneath her words in smaller print, "Because we chose it to be." Some nights, after everyone else had gone to bed, Noah would step out onto the porch, lean against the railing, and look up at the house, its windows aglow, the light above the door casting its familiar halo across the steps. He used to think, home was something you were born into, something you had, or lost. But now he knew better. Home was something you built, piece by piece, with hands that shook, with words you weren't sure would be heard, with light, especially with light. One night, Evie joined him. She didn't say anything for a while. Then, "You'll stay, right?" Noah looked at her. "I already am." She nodded, then leaned her head gently against his side. He put an arm around her shoulders, and they stood there together, not needing anything more than the sound of night settling over a house that no longer felt haunted. The porch light stayed on, not just for them, but for anyone who might need to find their way someday, and this time, Noah would be the one waiting at the door. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause, remember, or feel a little less alone, leave a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a light left on tonight, because sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that stay the longest.